But
Cool.
yeah, feel free to introduce yourselves. And yeah, kick off.
Okay, great. I guess I'll go first. You want me to go first, Trevor?
Mhm.
Um, my name's Chris Yingle. I am part of Liquid Fifth. I've been involved in a cappella production for close to 20 years now, which is crazy. Um, I live in North Carolina, right in the middle of North Carolina, where we kind of run operations for Liquid Fifth out of. And I've been doing live sound for almost as many, maybe about 17 of those years. We of course, our company of course does live sound specifically for a cappella, and we also do album production, recording, and editing and mixing for albums as well. We have a studio in Graham, North Carolina, and um, and that's kind of the story. I guess a fun fact about me is I got the opportunity in 2013 to go on tour with Pentatonix and run sound for them. And it was an incredible experience and learned so much. And, it was just one of those things that, you can't get that in an education. That's experience is a very special thing. So that was special. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, we've had a long relationship with these South Asian a cappella competitions, and it's a special thing to be a part of because the music is incredible and everybody cares so much, and um, that is contagious and it's awesome. So, uh, but yeah, that's me. I'm Chris.
Uh, I am Trevor. I don't see any faces, so I don't know who I've met before, but if you have been a part of A3 in the past 5 or 6 years, you have met me. I've been behind the soundboard, and I work with Liquid Fifth, as you guys know, and he's here for me, but it's different for everybody. Chris is the big man. He is my boss. He is the guy who taught me everything I know. So um, it's great to have him here as well. I started working with Liquid Fifth in 2015. I am very close to 10 years
Wow.
of working with Liquid Fifth now, which is cool. I've been working with A3. I feel like since 20 Liquid Fifth has been doing it since maybe 2016. I personally been doing it. I think 2018 or maybe 2019 may have been my first one. Um, but it's been really fun. Um, I had a minor. I had a few classes, but I studied some South Asian music in college actually, and then have produced dozens of South Asian a cappella groups since then. We kind of send a lot of the South Asian groups my way. I sort of am the L5 specialist in it. I've always been fast. I've always really loved the kind of the unique. Like I understand what Sarigama solos are, and I understand when people are doing tabla sounds, and like I've always really liked the different. It's just a whole different kind of approach to song structure and things. So I've always enjoyed getting to relish in that and do it well, and or at least help produce it well. Um, and really enjoyed the A3 competitions. I think doing something like this is really helpful because everybody, um, those of you who are in groups, I know you work really hard for like a whole year to get up to that point, and you want to do you want to be excellent on that stage, and you want to do everything as well as you can. So having this kind of connection this early on is really really a great idea and really helpful. So anyway, yep, I'm excited to connect about it. We're excited to share a little bit of our world. um I guess this will be more of a we're kind of gonna lecture a little bit, but it's very loose, and we're just gonna hit a few topics that are helpful, um, are that we feel are helpful to for groups to understand what's on our side of things. Both Chris and I were in uh performing a cappella groups in college, and both of us directed, and I mean, you don't really get into working in a cappella if you didn't do it in college. But so both of us have both sung in a cappella groups and also performed in various contexts for, uh, uh decades. So anyway, all that to say, we both of us understand what it's like to be on that side of things, and what it's like to have a sound guy that you need to work the dynamic between. You need to figure out how's the best way to work together. You need to figure out how we can sound our best. And both of us have been on the side of the soundboard of knowing, so we come into performances and concerts with that unique perspective of like, okay, I understand what's going on up there, and I also understand what is happening back here. And we do our best, at least, to try to marry those two experiences together to realize, like, hey, what's happening on stage is a lot more important than me having my little sound guy kingdom. Like, it's much more important for you to have a good experience on stage than for me to be right about something. But it's also important for something that has to be technically working a certain way to. So all that to say, um
Let me
yeah.
let me jump in. I want to kind of start by saying I like totally agree with all of that, and I love that. It's like important. The experience is so important in acapella because for so many of us, acapella is not a job. It's not our career. For singers and alike and all that stuff. And so the experience is everything because that's why we're in it. We're in it to experience it. And I just want to talk a little bit about kind of what it is. I mean, when we talk about A3, we talk about a competition. We talk about something that's very planned, and it's a lot of groups, and it's something very specific. But we also do a lot of shows that are not 15 groups in a row with 15 sound checks and just go straight through in a big competition and super high stress. Sometimes it'll just be one group and they're doing 12 songs, and that's the evening. And so when we started this years and years ago, there really wasn't this product out there. There wasn't a company that was doing sound for a cappella groups. And so we kind of started our system. We started with group mics that would just sit in the cluster in the middle and a couple of handhelds that would stand out in front of that. And then, oh, let's give the beatbox needs a mic and bass. And we kind of built it from there. And then after a while, we started to realize, well, we would see groups like, more professional, like 5 and 6 person groups that all had handhelds. Oh, wonder if that's relatable to big group a cappella from college. And so we kind of said, hey, let's do that. And so we got a rig of 18 mics and said, let's try that. And so we played with that, and that kind of grew. And it took another 5 or 6 years to get the competitions on board, whether it's ICCAs that we were involved with, or even A3. I think y'all were on board with mics from the beginning when we started working together, but kind of going through there and then creating that process. And so now we're kind of in a system where it's almost expected for everyone to have their own mic when you do a show like this, which is really exciting because there's so much that you can do with that, especially within the style that you see so prevalent at A3. It's a very specific style, and so the system is they're a good marriage, and that's been exciting to see as we go into those things. And so that's something to think about. And then the other piece of it that we don't often think about, and I know we're going to go through a bunch of this stuff, but the thing I always go back to is the process of planning of who has what mic and how it works. And that's a big part of kind of our process that we go through, so much so that you all know that there's a list and you write it out, and then we go through and we assign mics and things like that, and it becomes this whole process. And our plan from the beginning is always to make it as seamless as possible for the group. And it goes back to what Trevor kind of opened up with, which is because it's all about the experience for the singers so that they can have a great experience. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was just gonna say, so today we're gonna kind of be, like I said, just going through some subjects, but uh, because there's not too many people here, rather than necessarily having to save all the questions. Well, for the end, I think we'll have a dedicated time for Q&A if there are questions at the end. But also, I think we agreed that if you have a question that you want to ask on a certain subject, then feel free to
How do you do it? How do you
put the
rate?
little Zoom hand,
How do you do that?
the little robo hand. I don't know.
Do it.
I'm not a Zoomer, so I don't. But I assume everyone knows how to do that or can figure it out. So anyway, feel free to ask questions in the during a certain subject, and we'll
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So the first one here is the role of sound engineer, and I think that's kind of what we opened with as far as like what do we do? You know, it's like I think in so much of sound settings, and so much of sound settings is there's standards or you know, it's like, hey, this is how we do it. This is how we mic this person. This is how we do it. So we kind of tried to turn that on its head and rebuild it from the bottom up to say like what would be best for a group of 17 singers on stage, and one of them's beatboxing, and one of them's singing a bass line, and one of them's singing a guitar part, and then three of them are singing a trio or something like that. How could we do that? And so that's always what we have felt as our role as a sound engineer is to try to optimize for the group. And that's interesting on a one-on-one setting when we have a single group that we're working with. But it gets a little different when now you've got 12 groups that you're working with in a very quick succession. So then we're not only trying to make it specific to a cappella, but we're also trying to make it specific to a changing nature from group to group. And that can get tricky. And that's part of why monitors are the way that they are in our setup. That's part of why our list is the way that it is. Like our mic list, we like to set it up a certain way because it is tricky to switch from person to person so quickly on mics. And when I say person to person, I mean group to group. Um, and so that's an interesting kind of you know, aside there. So anyway, that's maybe anything else, Trevor, there on that first one?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, I mean, one thing that you all have heard me say at competitions, if you've been there, is we're there to help you. That is our only job, is to make you sound good. Uh, I, I some of you may have, and I have had experiences where, you have tech workers who are, it's kind of like you need to fit into what I'm doing. And no, your voice is already too loud in the monitors and stuff. And I get it, but I think just knowing that, like, um we don't have an agenda apart from you all sounding as best as you can. And so when that does mean like, hey, we can't actually do this thing, that's not because I want it to be how I want it. It's because that is the best product that you are gonna, in whatever instance, like, okay, we can't have these monitors so loud because when the monitors are blasting on stage, I mean, this goes into some of the later things, but when the monitors are so loud on stage, it actually makes a very muddied sound in the audience. So, that's just an example of like, hey, you know, we're in a we're in a hall that's very reverberant and we're having trouble hearing the monitors. And I'm hearing that feedback as a sound guy, but then I'm also balancing when I turn the monitors up even more, it's too hard for the audience to differentiate between the monitors and the speakers. And so I have, you know, we're back there having to balance there's the stage, there's the performers, but there's the balance between the monitors and the main speakers, and there's the reverberance, natural reverberance in the hall, and there's the fact that when the hall is filled with 400 people, the sound is dampened, and then there's the fact that this person thinks it's too loud in the audience, and this person thinks it's too quiet in the audience, and so we're always the one guy in the room that is having to balance all these things into their head and then make something happen in the room. And so I think just I've always felt I've always felt appreciated in that, but I think having that mindset of understanding that we have to take everything into consideration, and our goal is that you sound the best in the hall. That's what's most helpful to understand about our role.
That's good. That's good. That's good. And that's kind of a good segue into like a fun topic on here that's listed on here is sound sound chain or signal chain is a word that we use a lot. Even in training our people, signal chain is so important because anything goes wrong, we always run through the signal chain. Because if something's wrong or something's not making noise or something's not happening the way it's supposed to, somewhere in the signal chain something has gone wrong. And so running through the signal chain is a great thing. And so it says here, that the signal chain being you sing, sound comes out of your mouth, it goes into the capsule on the microphone, which then connects with the RF transmitter on the microphone, which turns it into a digital Wi-Fi signal,
Radio frequency.
radio frequency, sorry, RF. And then that sends that signal to the receivers, or actually to the paddles through the combiner into the receivers. And the receivers receive that RF signal and turn it back into audio signal. Then, generally through an XLR cable, that signal goes into the board. And then we get into the board. The board is a digital board. And so it has all sorts of different digital routings that can happen. Old-fashioned boards, you had a big channel strip, one big channel strip, and that sound would go straight down that channel strip, and it would have your gain structure, and then it would have an EQ, and then it would have all the things, and it goes straight down the board to the fader. Fader's at the bottom, turns it up and down. Digital board, it's all internal and you can change it all. You can switch this channel this way and you can send it to this effect and you can do all these things. So the signal flow goes through the board, somehow gets to the mains or back, and then back through some snake back up to the speakers in front. And that's the signal flow. I mean, it's a lot more convoluted than that, but
All right, now somebody tell me everything he just said.
that's yeah, there you go. Signal flow is so helpful to just kind of understand the directions the signal goes. If anyone is interested in getting into this,
Right.
understanding signal flow is so important. If you're not interested in getting into this, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I
Fun.
would say if what's helpful to understand on this on a as a performer, the more knowledge and understanding you have of what's going on the other side of things, the better you are going to be as a performer, and the better you are going to work with whatever tech people you ever work with in your life. Um, in terms of a microphone, like a wireless microphone, um, we so the like Chris said, the mics are wireless, so that connection, the wireless signal from the microphone to the paddle is one area where sometimes things can go wrong. And I'm not saying this just to like build your expectations for things going wrong, but it's helpful to understand, like, okay, if I'm hearing a popping or I'm hearing my voice go in and out, that is the connection that is going wrong at that point. Where sometimes in really crowded cities like New York City or Washington D.C. or Chicago, there's a lot of radio traffic, and so our microphones can have a lot more trouble having a strong signal. So sometimes, or just sometimes your channel goes bad and you have to change the radio frequency. But sometimes if you hear popping, you hear static, whatever, that is where that is happening. Um, and then the other, kind of the second area is the board processing, which is where the two most important things that happen on the board are a voice gets compressed and a voice gets equalized. So an equalizer is, you might have it in your car where you adjust the highs or the lows, and it's much more complex on the soundboard. But that's where we can make a bassy voice sound more bassy, and a higher voice, we can make it fit in the higher part of the spectrum and not sound so bassy. And, we can sort of make voices, we can make the octave fit the low end and the high and the snare fit the high end. And so we EQ every part of the ensemble differently. And so, if you were communicating to a sound person, if something sounds really thin or something sounds really muddy, that is the EQ is kind of a lot of times where that is
You'll see us grab for the EQ when we hear those types of
yeah. And then the last component is the compressor, which is a little more complex, but sometimes a compressor is where if something, it's difficult to really explain,
I
but
like to
like
use I like to use like pop singers like Ariana Grande. If you're listening to an Ariana Grande song, there's going to be moments in the song where she's singing really as loud as she can sing. And there's going to be a moment right after that where she's whispering almost and singing as quiet as she can sing. the volume of both of those moments of her voice are almost exactly the same. But they don't sound the same because in one she's belting and in the other she's quiet, but that compressor works to make those the same volume. So that one of them's not so loud that it hurts your ears, and then the next second you can't hear it because it's buried in the mix because she's whispering. So the compressor does that. I mean, that's a very rough way of describing it.
Compressor basically lowers the loudest and raises the quietest. So the way that you would experience that in a concert that I'm running, for instance, is if you have a solo that the verse you're singing really quiet and soft, and then you're belting the chorus, then I'm gonna have a pretty strong compressor on your voice, so that the quiet parts of the voice are of the verse are audible, and the loud parts of the chorus are not blasting everyone's ears out. Because you need to hear both. So you might hear your voice as like, oh, it sounds pretty like it doesn't really sound like it's as loud or as present, and it's because that compressor kind of creates sort of about something balanced that you're hearing. So anyway, I know those are topics that you could teach whole classes on each of them,
Yeah.
but we're trying to kind of sort of keep it to what's applicable to performances, and that's sort of a basic of that sort of signal
Yeah,
processing.
and EQ and compression are things that are very noticeable in pop music. And so one of the things that we try to achieve when we're mixing, especially like pop acapella or like an A3 or something like that, is generally taking the overall sound of the group and giving it a little bit of a pop feel. Like we could mix every voice to sound just like a voice and that would be a different sounding thing. But generally people that are consuming acapella music are used to kind of a radio pop sound, and so we're kind of mimicking a radio pop sound when we're putting the mix together of a group, and so that's why we use an octave. And then when the VP, when it goes, with a kick in the VP, we're going to add a little bit of low end to that to really let it punch, even though that's not what it sounds like in reality if you were just standing in front of me. So that's what we're doing there. We're mimicking a pop sound, and the effects really help with that. So.
Yeah, and I think based on I'm seeing the time, we can move through these a little bit
Yeah.
quicker. The one thing I was just gonna say about I'm trying to give some helpful tips about you're obviously this is focused on acapella competition. So I would say that a tip in regards to that area is when you're working with a professional, I think it's valuable to assume that they hear what you hear. So one problem at things like competitions, or one thing I should say that's just not helpful at competitions, is if an MD comes up to me and says, such and such sounds really thin or really muddy, or which is like it's valid, it does, but I can hear that. I know that it sounds that way. And a lot of times there's a reason that it's sounding that way, whether the room is acting a certain way, or there's feedback happening, or the group is singing very quietly. A more helpful question when you're hearing an issue with EQ, or when you're hearing an issue in that, is there anything that we can do to to help the way that it's sounding? Because I think that question helps kind of find a solution better than, like I said, it's helpful to just assume that I know I hear what you're hearing and I'm doing my best to fix it. But the most helpful thing on your end is to ask kind of like, is there anything that we can do on our end to address this? If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and I can couple in with that as well, is one thing that we say a lot when we're asking for notes is to give clear notes that demonstrate a want and also that say what that want is. I mean, we often get notes like what Trevor just described, whether it's in live settings or even in recordings and mixes, like where people say, "Hey, this sounds this way." And what's assumed in there is that we understand exactly what they're saying and that we understand what they want. And that's not always the case. And so having a clear, even if you are saying, "Hey, you know, that voice sounds thin to me," is what can be better is, "Hey, we want it to sound this way.
That's a great point.
We want it to we really would love that person to sound this way," and describe it. And you can describe it however you want. it's our job to kind of translate that. If you say it needs to sound like water, smooth water on a river that you can't see any ripples in. Okay, great. That's honestly helpful because we can translate those things. I mean, because you may not know, hey, can you make the compressor this way? Or whatever. And honestly, people that know and say those things, they probably do know those things and they understand how a compressor might work, but our mix may be working a little bit different to where that change on that compressor that you're envisioning may not actually accomplish what it is you're
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah. Goal. Uh, sorry, mine.
No, yeah,
I
go.
would say goal-oriented feedback is clutch.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
let me know what you want, and I will do my best. But how do I say it? Troubleshooted, troubleshooting oriented feedback is not as helpful because, like I said, most of the time we already know how everything is sounding. I mean, apart from like
Yeah,
you
obviously.
you know we missed this soloist entirely. Like sometimes, yeah, that's true. Okay, I didn't. This is the first time I heard the song. Thanks for the feedback. I won't miss it next time. But in terms of overall sound, goal oriented. Hey, this is what we're going for. Do what you can. That's the most helpful thing. I'm gonna keep moving here. I'm gonna cover um microphones and monitors kind of in one. So we were just talking about signal chain, so I'm just going to cover monitoring really quickly. So, any show that we run, we have between 2 and 4 monitors on the front of the stage. They're facing you and they are one monitor mix. So because the dynamics of everybody moving everywhere during sets and having, between 5 and 10 groups anywhere, uh it doesn't end up being beneficial to have monitor mixes that are mixed differently on different parts of the stage. So we have one mix that is it mirrors the main mix. So if anybody knows what anything about signal chain, our monitors are post fader, which means basically how I'm mixing the show is how it's coming through to the monitors. And that's important to know what because there's certain kind of there's kind of a hierarchy of priorities when it comes to mixing in the sense that like the beatboxing is a very important thing to hear. The bass is a very important thing to hear. The solo is a very important thing to hear. And the group as kind of a whole is an important thing to hear. So, we're mixing where there's elements that's like bass, beatbox, solos, and block. So the block you're sort of hearing as a whole, and you're hearing all the individual pieces of it, but you're hearing less of necessarily this specific voice, this specific voice, this specific voice. So when you're hearing the monitors, you're hearing that mix mirrored back to you. Um,
So that's to me that's like I would say it's not the same as the main mix. It's very different from the main mix, but the way you're saying it, I think makes sense in that
that's a fair point. Yeah,
it
it
mirrors
does
and
sound very different than the main mix. I meant in terms of the balances, but keep going.
yes, I mean post fader is a word that makes sense to like an audio tech and saying that what we're doing with the monitors is we're setting the levels a certain way that can be different from the main mix. And then when faders for each channel are adjusted in the main mix, it also is adjusting them in the monitors. So for instance,
Yeah,
in
that's
my monitor setup, I have a lot of solo, a lot of drums, a lot of bass. And those are the three main things. I do have group in the monitors, but at a much lower point. And that means, so because I have the group in there, when someone gets turned up as the soloist, they pop out of the texture in the monitors, which is helpful so that the soloist can hear themselves. If you hear and I've said this to a million people at a million shows, if everyone is up in the monitors, then we hear no one in the monitors. And so we had to kind of figure out, okay, for a cappella with 18 people on stage, what's the best things for the groups to hear in the monitors? And we kind of settled on bass, drums, solo. And then the group is in there too, just not as loud. And so that's what post fader is. It allows for that. If everyone was pre fader, that means that every voice would just be set and it would never change in the monitors. And that would be really tricky from song to song. So.
yeah, and man, these minutes are passing by quickly. I'm gonna
Yeah,
um
we can
try
jump
to get
forward.
to the more valuable stuff soon. But just basically, with the monitors, this is something we go over at every competition. You don't want to point the microphones at the monitors. The only time that feedback really isn't as much of a challenge anymore, but without now that we have just solo microphones, but you just don't want to have you just want everyone to be singing on the microphone. I mean, all this mic technique is stuff we go over at every show and every competition. So, um, but you're
It's called, we call it proximity effect. And so when the mic is very close, your voice sounds different from when it's farther away. And what we have found is that when there are different voices taking that mic and picking it up inside of 2 hours, like maybe there's 10 different voices that are going to pick up that exact same mic, we get a better sound to all the voices when it's close versus if we were to mic it for a far singing. Because you can mic mics for far singing and you can mic them for close singing. And essentially what it is if I'm far singing, I have less proximity effects, so I need to boost the low ends. If I'm close singing, I have more proximity effect, so I need to cut some of the low ends. And you'll hear that as people come close to the mic and then bring it away. You'll hear that it gets warmer closer up and it's a little bit thinner farther away. So we have found that closer and being able to cut some of the lows and adjust the lows on the fly is such a better sound across the board when the mics are shifting very quickly between sets. And so that's why we do it that way. And also compressors help with that as well, because you might be singing quiet real close, but then you might be wailing and singing so loud real close, and both work within that setting, if that makes sense. If you're holding all the way back here and you're singing loud, great. If you're holding all the way back here and you're singing real quiet, we're really not going to be able to hear you. And so that's why
yeah.
that
So
kind of why
yeah.
that.
So Maya had a quick question. Is
Yep.
it worthwhile spending tech time testing individual voices and vocal parts? And I'm glad you asked that because this is something we encounter a lot during sound checks, and because sound checks are often so time crunched, it is usually not worth the time to test an individual voice part. It's very rare that I will have an individual singer stop because usually what I'm trying to get is the whole picture.
Right.
If we need a certain singer to test, we will stop you and say, "Hey, can you sing your solo just for a second alone?" Or, "Hey, can you do that beatbox sound just for a second?" But we know how to do that kind of in a way that takes so little time. So it's much better to, I would say, plan on letting us do that when we need it and not because a lot more often than not we don't need it. If that answers your
Doing a
question.
show on your own and you've got lots and lots and lots of time, then it can be helpful to do that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I
We are
guess I'm
we
yeah.
Well, yeah, we build our system. We build our system to not need that because we are so often in situations like these competitions where we have 12 minutes with the group and we want to hear the song. We want to hear you get through your set because we want to mix it. We want to be a part of it with you, like essentially another musician in the group, because we're trying to stay with you and hear solo changes and all that stuff. And we want to hear, what did you intend with this chord structure? What did you intend with this low end, with this drum, with this solo? And so the more we hear the set, this is the main note I give when I go to competitions. The more you sing your set, the better off we are during your sound check. So, start the set, sing it all the way through, then start it again and sing it all the way through. And so, do that as opposed to stopping and changing things and fixing things. We want to hear the set as much as possible. And that also helps you because it means we'll do a better job on the mix when we've heard it as much as possible. So,
Yeah, the best use of your what is the best use of your limited tech time? The best use is you performing exactly the way you're going to perform. I say it every
yeah,
single
I
every single
retweet.
competition is I do exactly what you're going to do live. And that includes I realize that a lot of times you directors you need to see what's going on, and that's fine. But that includes MDs, sing with your group, be on stage. I mean, again, it's for you. So when you need to take that time to see, like, okay, here's, you need to do choreo. It's not like that's a sin, but if I'm telling you what helps me the most, it's hearing everyone on stage, everyone singing full. That basically hearing what I'm going to hear during the competition. But you as a group, you have to balance your choice of the tech time. Obviously, I'm not the only person that's a part of that. You also need to figure out the space and all that. So it's not wrong for you to take time to figure choreo and stuff, but
I want to say also, like, a little fun pro tip here. Well, this isn't a pro tip, but I don't know. Uh, that also extends to choreo specifically, and costumes. And not you don't always have the opportunity to have your costumes on in your sound check and do your choreo. But for me, and I tell people don't stop to fix choreo, but do your choreo and sound check. And that's because imagine being in our heads where we've got a list of songs and mic changes. We get 12 seconds to see and kind of take
Oh
mental
yeah, the
snapshots
choreo.
of your group. And when you show up on stage an hour and a half later, we got 12 minutes from an hour and a half ago mixed in with 11 other groups that did the same thing. It's like I have a memory of this person that walked on in a silver shirt and sang and did the choreo. And when they popped out, that was that moment when they had that quick solo change. And I see that later, and it's easier for me. So often people change in between, and that's okay. Like that's not a problem, but it's just a little tip. Like you might get a little bit of an edge if you have all of your costume on in sound check because I'll remember what that soloist looked like and this soloist did the choreo and popped out and I nailed that change instead of it being like the choreo wasn't there, the costumes weren't there, and now all of a sudden it looks like a completely different group when you come out for your show. So anyway, that's just a little fun thing.
All right, I'm going to jump into effects here. And so this is these type of questions aren't ultra common, but they do pop up almost every year in some sense. And I'm glad I'm getting to say this because basically I would say effects. Oh, sorry, I thought there was another question. The best way for you guys to think about effects in a live setting versus a studio one or a recorded setting is we don't use, for the most part, we don't use effects as like uh as effects or we're not using like distortion, chorus, any kind of like unique creative, like this is going to be a statement effect. The only real effects we're using are octavization and reverb and compression, EQ, and that kind of stuff. Reverb when it's necessary. Most of the time I'm not using reverb in a lot of spaces. The main effect that we're using on the board is bass and octave. And what I was going to say about that is I I would treat our use of effects as kind of just like I don't even know how to say it. It's just like a,
Well,
a, a baseline, like a fact of life. Like we're using it the same way every time unless there's some specific request. And by that, I mean the octave particularly, we're mixing that in very actively. We're
yeah,
mixing it in when there's drums, when there's a kick drum in there to fill out the low end, we're
okay.
filling out the low end with the octave bass. And
Yep.
when there's no drums, when there's no VP and it's just voices, we're not using it except very sparsely sometimes to accentuate like a big cadence or a big moment. I'm sliding a little bit of octave in there. But even that is example to say we're mixing it like very intentionally. Like it's part of our mix. It's not like a
It's not like we
I
flip it
what I'm
on.
what I'm
Yeah.
seeing is that groups are kind of seeing it as like this is our choice. We have to decide whether we want it or not, and it's going to affect our performance, and we got to make this choice. But what it is it's a mixed tool that we use when it works for a good reason when it works, and we don't necessarily need input on that. It's not that input's not welcome, but a helpful way to just kind of contextualize that is like the effects we use are all mixed tools that we use when they're useful for their use, and they're not like none of them are like blanket like, oh, if I turn the octave on it's going to be always on even during that ballad we sing. Nothing is that kind of static nature, if that makes sense. um and I could go more on effects, but for the sake of time, I think that's. And like Chris, do you feel like that's the right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I keep talking about ICCAs. We do a lot of those too, and their rule is that they don't allow groups to give feedback on the octave. And it's because we mix it like the way that Trevor just described. And and we try to be artistic with it, and then the judges are asked not to judge based on the octave. And so for us, effects tend to be things that we're putting in the mix to make the whole group sound better. And if you're noticing one individually, it's probably too much. And that's the way we mix. And so I use delay and reverb, but I don't generally put it in a mix to where someone's hearing it to the point where they're going, oh, delay, or like, that kind of thing. Or even the octave is really just to warm up the low end and connect it with the kick when there's drums in
Right.
and fill that space between those two frequencies. And that's kind of how we're, so yeah, and that's a good description.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump into this section called cues and the competition's role. So cues in terms of like how you're communicating your set cues to us. Now this is a really important one because or I should say this is one that's not so cut and dry because it is a challenge. It's a challenge on your end and it's a challenge on our end. And uh we do our best to follow cues, but we don't do a perfect job every single time. So, the challenge here is what's the best way that you as the group can set us up for success in in uh in meeting cues. And I would say two things on one on either end that is most poignant that I've noticed from A3 competitions. On one end, timing means nothing. I've received a lot of sheets from groups that say at 2 minutes and 30 seconds or at measure number 55, this is going to happen. And that means absolutely nothing to me. I'm not, I mean, you can understand. I'm not sitting there with a stopwatch. I'm missing. So, um, I'm sure that's the kind of thing that makes sense while you're writing it down, but then when you think about the actual application of it, you understand how that doesn't work for us. To be honest, the best thing you could do for cues is to build it into your choreography.
Mm,
There's nothing more effective for
mm,
cues than it being part of your choreography. If
yeah,
if
that's right.
somebody has a featured line, all the time it'll happen this kind of thing that like so and so has a saregama solo in the bridge here or has just an aria or a riff or something they're doing. That's I would say the most common sort of part, and this is just being vulnerable here as an engineer. The most common thing, although I do my best, the most common thing that I might miss is like that one singer that has a featured part that's not even a solo, that's at the end of song two and toward the end of the set, whatever. Um, that person, I'm gonna find them 70-80% of the time, but there's that 20% of the time that like when they don't pop out of the choreo and I'm focusing on the group and not the sound sheet, that's the one that's the person that is most likely that I might miss. And again, I mean, I'm not trying to say expect failure here, but I'm just trying to be transparent in this communication. And the
Yeah,
best thing,
oh,
yeah,
sorry. I was gonna say choreo is a huge help, and it helps your audience too. It really helps your audience. I mean, if it
it
helps
does
us,
for
it
sure.
definitely helps the audience to
Even
understand what's
more, I
going
would say.
on. Say it again.
Even more, I would say it's helpful
Yeah.
for even more for the audience because they can
Yeah.
see, oh, that person's singing that riff right now, and that person's doing this VP solo right now, that kind of thing. And building into your choreo, having that person be some sort of highlight, some sort of feature is just far and away the best way to do it. Our sound sheets
Course.
are,
I mean,
yeah,
we're jumping. I mean, I think most people know this process because most of the people listening have been through it. But of course, there's a sheet that tells us that too. But what we're saying, I think, is that having it built into the choreography is a visual cue for us to know and a timing cue as well. Because of course, we can't have a stopwatch going. We can't be following along with measure numbers. So we kind of have things in order and we kind of know, and okay, I've done this. I did this twice in sound check. I kind of remember that this is the order. I'm seeing it on my sheet and I'm kind of waiting to see the cue when that next singer's coming out. Here they come. Oh, no. And if they're buried in the back and they start their solo buried in the back. Now, sometimes that's what the choreo needs. It's a surprise. They're buried in the back. They're going to pop out after they start singing. That's a note I'm going to take in sound check maybe when it confuses me the first time I see it. But I think choreo. I think that's a great point, Trevor.
Yeah, and then just the secondarily, the best way is your mic sheet, and I mean we always edit this, but like a sequential mic sheet. We do that. We do all the mics in order. 1 and 2 are bass and perk, and then every solo's timing sequentially is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 down the line. That's the most helpful way,
Mhm.
and
It's really nice when you're doing a set of 10 groups and even though it's written on your sheet, but you also know that that group's going to come out on stage and the first person to have a solo is going to be on three.
yeah,
And
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 obviously,
so
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
And obviously sometimes the same singer comes back on and that's fine, but
Yeah, and
at
they'll
least setting yourself up that like the people that come on in order are going to be in this order.
yeah, it's
And
great.
just I would say yeah, in terms of the notes on the sound sheet, they're always not perfect, but I would say that choreo notes and to be honest, English song lyrics are helpful. When I see Hindi lyrics written out, it's not always easy to connect what's written down to like what's happening right there because I can't really connect what's written to what I'm hearing. So, but choreo, like, hey, when we circle up, this is happening. If that makes sense, if people are following me, kind of like, how do I write this out in the sheet? How do I write this cue out on the sheet? If it's maybe not in the choreo, what's the best way I can write it down? And I would say, reference the choreo, and then possibly reference like chorus to these lyrics, that sort of thing. Um,
All right, Trevor, let's do
yes.
common issues and quick fixes. Why don't we go back and forth? What are the most common problems or issues that we deal with?
Um,
I
so
think mic technique, sorry, I answered my own
yeah,
question, but technique is probably one of the top ones. When we have a soloist that just maybe grew up holding a mic a different way, and so it's hard to kind of correct that muscle memory, or someone that's just forgetting, or someone that's got heavy choreo and the mic's ending up over here or over here.
Mike
That
staying
really
right
changes
here is
the
a big
sound.
one.
Yeah, that's
Mike
a big
staying
one.
right there. I mean, this is a big kind of one-on-one stuff that I go through every show, every competition. You're gonna hear this from me, but just keep the mic there. I mean, I expect you guys are expecting that out of your singers, but just drilling it, just practicing it
Mhm.
is important. And then
Sometimes I see a lot of groups do that with pens or with water bottles when they're
yeah,
practicing.
with your phones and
Just
stuff.
kind of having that kind of, what's the word, that just kind of physical representation of something like right here, where you know that when you get that mic in your hand, it's going to be it's going to be there, and it's not going to
Yeah,
sit down.
I think these ones are kind of like this is sort of baseline to be expected. I think everyone should expect you're holding the mic correctly and you are also picking the right mic up. It always happens every show somebody is
And
singing a solo on the
leave
wrong
it
microphone
on also.
and we got to find it and it takes a while. But grab the right mic. I think that one goes without saying. I'm going to say something that be maybe more my opinion, maybe not super popular, but
Controversial.
what'd you say?
Controversial. Let's hear it. Can't wait.
um Complexity does not always impress judges
Hmm.
nor the audience member. I
Hmm.
would say complexity is something like, and when I say complexity, I mean like we have 8 different soloists on this song, and at the end of the song, they're singing all 3 songs at one time, and it's amazing, and we wove it all in together, and the judges are gonna love this. It just does not come across most of the time. I'm just gonna be honest with you. It doesn't. You can't hear all 3 songs individually. You can't even hear both songs really individually most of the time. I mean, I'm not saying that you can never do that, but this is
Definitely, it
this
definitely.
is a workshop for the purpose of helping you perform at these competitions better. And Chris and I will tell you from 20 to 30 years of experience between the two of us,
Yeah.
the best groups are the ones that sing a good song with a good soloist one soloist to the song, or one soloist and two harmonies join them in the third chorus, or whatever, or a trio solo, but the and okay,
Let me rephrase that a little
well,
bit. Let me
yes,
soften it and rephrase it a little bit. I think something that I've learned over the years of doing this is there is a very fine line to walk between complexity and something being easy to mix. Okay. When I say we, I mean sound people. We're in a really interesting position with acapella because you can't just set it and forget it. Like you could, like if you were a wedding band, for instance, I could kind of set everybody up, make sure they sound good, and then just let them go because they're going to do dynamics, they're going to sing loud and quiet, all this stuff. With everyone holding a wireless mic, the dynamics of hold and just everyone different voices and the way they sing, it's so different that we have to actively mix always. We always have to be actively mixing, which means I'm turning someone down and I'm turning this part down and I'm maybe turning the sopranos down and then I'm turning back them up. So I want to help you mix. The more intricate that your mix requires, like let's say there are 8 solo changes in the first verse and
right,
the same 8 in the second verse. That happens, like, and I understand the vision behind that when arranging, but when that happens, that's all that we're able to focus on. So we don't have the ability as much to tweak the mix. And so I can't tell you how often it's been where there's a really incredible group that has that situation and it just never lands quite as well as the other group that maybe wasn't as skilled, that had a single soloist for their first song, and I was really able to like dial that in, because I'm sitting there listening to them and it just sounds really nice and it's clean. So there is a very fine line. Like I think awesome. Sometimes those ideas work great and they kill it. And even that like trio putting 3 songs together, sometimes that works great too. But it really has to be done in a way that the music lends to it. And so I would say there's a fine line. So as you're
yeah,
arranging your tracks, know that the more complexity you put in, the tougher a time you're going to have in that mixing in any competition that you go into, and know that if it's very simple, then it's going to be that maybe isn't going to be what you have to worry about. And so there's a fine line. So add those things and see how it goes, and then maybe next time do a little bit less or do a little bit
yeah,
more. Test it out.
right. That's a great way to put it. And I would say, obviously, I know in a Desi acapella context, mashups are such a staple of the Desi acapella world, and I understand that. And it's not that mashups are wrong, but in arranging the mashups, I would encourage an approach of celebrating each song, like having a space for each song and celebrating it individually, rather than the the overlap being the celebration of both songs. It's like, oh, look how much we're doing at one time, rather than like, we fit these songs together well, and here's this song beautifully and this song beautifully. And some overlap at the end is not wrong. I just it's just very common to have like a lot of overlap of soloists singing two different things at once, and I've just found that it it comes across better in a studio setting than it does live. Live, it's often audiences want to know what that singer is doing and what that singer is doing. Um, okay, yeah. We need to
Yeah,
start
I
the
think
Q and
I
A
think we can
soon.
kind of close. We can kind of close with this. I think.
I was just gonna say one
Oh,
one thing.
you're right.
I love when South Asian acapella groups do Hindi songs fully, just a Hindi song, and just do it well. Like, that is my favorite thing, and I don't know if anybody thinks that is a little bit inferior, but oh my gosh, this is my favorite thing. Like, this group did Gunnan Gunnan a few years ago, and it was just that song, and it was so good. So if you want to make Trevor happy, just do that and do it well. We can start Q&A soon. Yeah, it's already,
Yeah,
man,
I would say so. This last thing, you're building trust with the engineer. Trevor talked about it a little bit before, but I would say, I think if there's a mutual trust, if you give us a note, we hear the note. We also know what we're doing in that moment. We kind of know where we're at in the mix and what we're hearing. We're gonna take that note. We're gonna execute it to the best of our ability, whether that means that it's audible, that change is audible to you or not, or whether it's possible. Sometimes it's very possible and very simple to make a specified change. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes there's factors out of our control that keep us from doing certain things. So I would say, as you give notes, please give all the notes that you want to give. Like, don't be afraid to give a note. Hey, even if it's like really specific, and we will take that in, we'll take all of that information in, and all of that information combined we'll use to try and make the set as good as we possibly can for you. And so I think that's where that trust comes in, to know that we're doing all of those things that we can to do it. And that, only so much is possible. Generally, that's most everything. All the notes that are given, we can generally execute on. Every once in a while, there's a note given that I hear it and I go, I don't think that's possible. And maybe I'll say that back to a person or something like that. But just that trust there of knowing that we're doing all that we can, and you are as well. And so as we communicate, to know kind of, hey, here's what I'm hearing, here's what you're hearing, here's a note. And again, like, here's what we want. We want it to sound like this right here. We want this moment to be big. We want this moment to be small. So I think that's the big thing, is knowing that it's not always black and white when it comes to, hey, can you just do this? Can we just do this? Can you just fix this? There's a lot going on inside that board, a lot going on stage with the different voices and the different things that are going on. So that's maybe what I would say about trust. We always just want the group to sound good. That's always my main goal, is that the group would sound good and that I could put you in a situation to succeed and feel like you're killing it. And then the audience stands up and roars when you're done. That's always the goal. So yeah, cool. We want to do a Q&A. That's it. You don't No follow up there, Trevor?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I mean, yeah, if there's a lack of questions too, we can
Yeah,
fill it in with a couple more kind of like common issues. But
probably got
yeah,
time for questions if anybody have any.
for sure. I guess people could turn their cameras on, or you could just write questions. We can just write questions.
True.
I'm gonna keep talking about some. Oh, we got a hand.
No, I was just saying I see our
Oh,
hand.
you're raising a
Hello.
hand. While we're giving space for questions, I am yeah, I guess just Trina or Trisha or anybody, just if people want to turn their cameras on or anything for questions, let me know. But I'm gonna keep talking about some and Chris, if you want to look for the
I got you.
messages. Any more common issues. I would say um when it comes to competition day, or I would say kind of tunnel vision focus on certain um on the mix versus the performance. Arjun raised his hand.
I like that. Well, before you ask this question, though, I want to kind of say that too. I think that's a really good point, Trevor, is the mix. I say this now at competitions when I go, the mix is going to change from the second that you start singing at the beginning of your sound check to the end of your sound check to the beginning of your performance, even to the end of your performance. So allow for that time to occur. And I think I usually tell groups, continue singing. If you start singing at the
Right.
beginning of your sound check and it sounds like everything's falling apart, keep going, because I am feverishly fixing everything that moment. So even 3 seconds from now, it's going to be a little bit better.
Oh
And
yeah, always
now it's going to be even better.
always leave at least like 5 to 8 minutes for us to like get the mix right, you know. But I was just gonna say tunnel vision of like trying to in your sound check, we got to get this mix right,
Yeah,
rather than let's figure out performing on this stage as best as we can, is I would say a pitfall, because I just need that time to figure out the mix. I've never heard your group before. I only have 10 minutes to figure it out. Let me spend that time figuring the mix out. I don't need. I mean, I'm like we don't need you to mix with us. We need you to perform.
that's right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes I see groups that are stopping to oh, can we fix this? Stop the performance. Oh, this sounds a little thin, and that's just actually hamstringing me because I can't. So anyway, let's go ahead and Arjun, can you unmute yourself? Or yeah, you
Yeah,
can.
yeah. Um, thanks for this whole hour. It was actually really great. I love to hear you guys talking about all this stuff. I'm sure everyone else enjoyed it too. My question is a little bit different. I think a lot of what y'all talked about was kind of geared towards the performer and the teams.
Hmm.
But from a competition organizer perspective, like as they're picking their venue, kind of planning out the rehearsal schedule, etc., communicating with y'all or any other sound company that they decide to hire. What are some of the tips and tricks or like, best practices with like the space, the equipment, the rehearsal schedule, etc., that kind of sets the engineer up for success throughout the whole day and competition weekend?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think space-wise, something that is made for performance. And that sounds ridiculous, but generally, I think A3 is great with this in finding a space that is made for amplified performance, specifically amplified performance. Because sometimes we'll be in halls that were designed for unamplified performance, and that can be crazy with the amount of reflection reverb that happens. So like a theater that's made for that. Day of, I think Trevor really can speak to day of. I know that A3 is a little different than a lot of the other competitions that are kind of all happening in one day. But like my main thing would be time for sound check, whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's 15 minutes, getting to hear the group there, I think is always the biggest thing. Trevor, you're muted if you want to add in. Oh, maybe you're not.
I think there's one person here,
Yes.
and then there's two
Two,
questions
yeah.
after.
All right, Sid, do you want to give your question and then we'll do these two from the chat and then I think we'll probably be out of time.
Sure. So I just had like two very quick questions. So the first is on sort of hearing ourselves when we're on stage. So I was wondering if there are certain ways, I think you mentioned, the performers being able to hear the soloists, beatbox, and bass. And I've been at performances where I couldn't really hear anything, and I was wondering, kind of on the engineering side, from your perspective, what can be done, I guess, from that point of view to help the performers sort of um, with that and with like making sure they're together when they sing. Is that purely kind of a hall type scenario, or is that something different?
So, and you're talking about from the like in the monitors or in the audience?
In the monitors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the monitors, I mean, I would say uh, communication is always the best. It's if you even if it's the same after every song, hey, we're still having trouble hearing the VP. You communicating, I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to figure out how can I make this mix better for them. I'm never giving up on. I will say sometimes it just is not a good space for it. It just kind of part of mixing, part of live performing. Sometimes we have no problems with the monitors, and problem sometimes every group says we're having trouble in the monitors, and I did not change one thing from those two shows. And it just happens that way, and we just take it as it comes and try and address things. I would say on the
Wait,
on the
okay.
yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
on the side of the performers, just communication is the best thing. I mean, I could be specific about what we're trying to change, but I mean, it's just always different. It's always troubleshooting. It's always putting
Okay.
out fires and figuring out what's the best thing for that space. But um,
I'll answer your question about hearing yourself on stage. And I think that this is a good question because I think a lot of people have the same feeling where they start their sound check and they're like, I can't hear myself. I don't know what to tell you. And I get that. And what I would say to that is I tend to tell groups this, I said it before already. If we turn everybody up in the monitors, then you'll be able to hear nothing. It'll just be cacophony. There's no way for me to mix the monitors the way that we mix the house. You can't do it the same way. And so um, it's just not possible. There's not that bandwidth, and you then lose everything else because the monitors can't be as loud. They can't overpower the house, or else you start to have real problems. That being said, as the mix gets better throughout the sound check, I always find that groups settle and they start to be able to hear themselves. They start to be able to blend better. So as we tweak the mix, and that's one of the reasons why I say keep singing, keep trying to hear, keep trying to hear the people around you and hear the overall mix and the and or take from the bass or take from the solo and anywhere that you can get pitch center, anywhere that you can get grounded into what you need to be singing. As the sound check goes on and things clean up, the monitors do the same thing. As we clean up the mix, the monitors clean up slowly but surely. And generally, by the end of your sound check, most people will say, I feel like I can hear myself better now." Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be so loud in the monitor that you hear your voice crystal clear the whole time, because again, as soon as I turn you up to that point, now then three other people can't hear themselves. I turn them up to that point. Now you can't hear yourself again. And so that's the dance that we play in the monitors when it comes to 18 people on a mic for a cappella. So I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah.
my
So
big
just to clarify,
yeah.
uh, when you say focus on the mix and what you said right now, are you saying don't self-correct at least your like dynamics, for example, at the beginning, if you think it sounds too loud to you
Yeah,
from the monitor?
that's a great point. That's a
Yes,
great
do
point
not
because
self-correct.
self-correcting changes the way you sound. It doesn't just change your volume, it changes the way
And
you're
it's also a
sounding.
cascade effect. People start singing quieter, then they can't hear themselves, and then and then there's more feedback and all
At the
that.
beginning of your sound check, you will have people in the group that are louder than other people because of where their gain set is and the way that their voice works. And so we are immediately then attacking those voices that are louder or quieter and adjusting them up so that everyone's in a close place. So naturally, the monitors and the mains are going to kind of clean themselves up as we're attacking the mix, as you're singing through your set and we're getting to know your sound and your voices and your solo mix and changes and all that stuff. And that's a really great question. Really great question.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
gonna
That's helpful.
yeah, I'm gonna
Okay,
try
so
and hit a couple of these written questions. So,
yeah,
when arranging in general, what are some common pitfalls that we should avoid considering the fact that we're going to be singing on mics? I would say, and this is me, I did this when I was in college arranging, is I just complexity is always like um polyphony, all these different rhythms, trying to like when it's in muse score it sounds great, but I would say like lyrics sung together are king. Like when everybody is singing the same words together, that's the soul of acapella. So it's not that you have to be doing that all the time, but polyphony is valuable in certain instances, but don't go too crazy with it because it's not going to come across on a stage. It might come across in a studio if you want to record it, but it's less often that it comes across on stage.
I think
And I would say also arranging too deep for your basses. Don't have It doesn't matter whether you're all high voices, upper voices group, or you're a mixed group, or you're all lower voices group. Arrange. Okay. This is the main one is the actual bass lines of the song, the fundamentals of every
yeah,
single
there you
chord.
go.
That is the
That is
number
number
one
one.
thing.
That's number
The
one.
number one thing from every single year. Have your basses sing the fundamentals of the chord, unless the inversion is intentional. Always have the bassist sing the fundamental, because most importantly, live, we are octavizing that bass one octave down. So if it's not on the fundamental, it doesn't make any sense to be
The
octavizing
fundamental
it.
is a good way to put it. If any theory nerds are out there, it's your bass note in a figured bass setting. So it's like that's like with the inversions, yes, oftentimes there's an inversion and that needs to be the note, but for the most part it needs to be your root. Um, yeah. So
And then
I would say my answer to that
yeah,
question is not exactly for sound, but it is don't feel the need to arrange the song the way it is. I can't tell you how often I hear an intro that is arranged exactly like the original song, and it's like a good solid 15 seconds of something that no one needed to hear because they could have started it after that intro. Or same thing with a song outro. How often do we hear, hey, a song was awesome, up and down, epic, and then we get to the end and it could have ended, and then we hear this like 15-second outro because that's how the original was, but it's dead
yeah.
in acapella. It doesn't work. And so, he said multiple people singing the same words, that's great. You don't often hear that in pop music. Same thing with like ooze, like a section of ooze in the background. It's all just ooze and a solo. Those moments can be some of the most effective moments in an entire set, and it's super simple. So it doesn't always have to sound exactly like the original. Some things work really well when they translate to voices, some things don't. And I think finding the things that don't and replacing them with something that does is one of those tricks in arranging that really takes arrangements to the next level.
Yeah. The most egregious pitfall would be bass lines, though.
Bass lines is the most egregious. That's the
Sure.
yeah, you're right.
Okay. Is there anything we should be wary of when we set up mics for rehearsals? Like, is there anything we can mess up with mic setup during rehearsals that will end up hurting us during sound check or performance?
The bass
Um,
lines are wrong. That's the
if your
one.
bass lines are wrong.
Just
No, I would say the only note I would have for setting up mics and rehearsals is just not to have it shape your expectations necessarily,
Hmm.
because there's a good chance it's going to sound a lot different on a big stage or on our system than it is in your rehearsal hall. Uh, Mics are very helpful if you have access to them, and I don't think there's any issue with using them or how you mix them. But I would just say try not to get that kind of like you're married to a certain sound, and if you don't hear that in your monitors, you're going to be messed up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think committing bad mic technique to muscle memory is one pitfall of that. If you don't have compressors on whatever mic setup you're using in your rehearsal space and you have a really loud singer and they're like, "Well, I'm going to pull the mic away during this part." It's like that could create muscle memory for that, and we're asking groups not to do that. So, but if you're aware of that and you understand that, that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I saw a hand that was lowered. So maybe we don't have that question anymore. Um, oh, one new message. Okay.
I will say it's very helpful, especially in quieter sections. Like it's helpful to use a bass mic in rehearsal, almost always, because it helps ground the group. And a lot of times basses are tougher to hear, and we tend to coach basses in a darker direction and less of a bright direction. And when you're singing a completely acoustic, you tend to be brighter to be louder. And a mic can help you sing a little bit softer on the bass line, maybe with a timbre that you would want to use when you're mic'd in competition. So bass mics are really useful in rehearsals.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Cool. Sweet. Well, thank you so much for having us and listening to us just babble on about what we do.
Yeah, anything else, Trisha, or anybody?
That should be all. Thank you guys so much
Yeah.
for letting your insights. I'm sure the community learned a lot, and I definitely learned a lot as well. But yeah, thank you guys, and thanks for everyone.
For
Thanks to
sure,
everyone
yeah.
for coming
And if
out.
anybody has any further questions or wants to reach out about working together or um, working sound things out, then you can find us at liquidfifth.com, and both of us are on there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's great being with you guys tonight.
Thank
All right,
you.
have a good night.
Oh, Trevor left.
Oh,
Arjun, I was like, I don't know that we really answered your question, but
No, that's okay. I think there were a lot of team members on this call.
oh,
And
so we maybe missed on that, or
no, well, I think no. There were. I don't think there were as many competition organizers as team members.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
But I wanted to get at least something for the competition organizers, like get them a little insight for like the setup of
Yeah.
their venue and the rehearsals and sound and all that. So,
I think
but
with
that's okay. I think we can.
Well, and I think specifically with A3, it's helpful to have. I was thinking of this after we moved on, but it's so
Yeah,
helpful when y'all do venues that have the big sound systems, and then we can
yeah,
track and board. And
yeah,
it's like it makes more sense that way because then you can have this big sound and we're not renting and spending all. So uh,
yeah,
that's
Yeah.
another piece of it. The venue really does matter. It really
yeah.
does. And y'all
Absolutely.
have like, especially with Trevor, y'all have really worked on the setup. How are we going to rehearse? How are we going to do sound checks? Are we going to do another time and come back to it and all that stuff? And I think that's been really good. Like from what I've
Yeah.
heard, every year it's been a little bit better. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think A3 for sure. Like we always try to pick a good venue, things like that. I know for competitions, like big competitions, um, it's definitely more of a struggle because there are college organizations putting these like competitions on. Their venues honestly aren't that great because they're geographically limited and they're financially limited.
Yep.
So kind of like I guess that question is geared to like if you ever have like an unideal venue or like or how do like feedback monitors work? Like, can we do things to tweak them? Maybe things like that. But yeah, I definitely agree. Venue is super, super important. I think that's something that we also on our side are trying to like figure out, help out competitions with. But
yeah, and it'd be interesting to have a conversation about ways that I feel like I could come up with ways that you guys could go into situations where you don't have like an acapella specific sound engineer and kind of things that you could say to disarm that situation because like that's a tough situation for someone that's like, oh, wait, what? You need 18 wireless mics and I've got to mix them all. And it's like, but I feel like with what we do, we could communicate that somehow to help you. Like with some, because I know y'all have a bunch that are all over the place, and sometimes, like you said, it's not an ideal situation. And so that's something we could maybe work on and come up with some, I don't know, what's the word, documentation or something like that to kind of like help in that situation when you're stepping into a something that feels like it's going to be tough from the drop, right? So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be excellent to work on. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So,
yeah,
mm,
cool, sweet,
yeah.
well, thank you so
appreciate it.
much again. And thank you so
Yeah,
much for your time as well.
yeah.
Again, really, really do appreciate it. But yeah, thank you.
It's good to see y'all, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. It's almost the weekend. No, it's not. It's Tuesday.
It's
Almost the
Tuesday.
weekend for me. I'm going to the beach tomorrow, so it's like it's almost the weekend for me. So
Oh, okay. That's cool. Well, have fun. I hope the family's doing great.
yes, yes. Thank you for saying that, and
Yeah.
hopefully see you guys soon. We'll do this again soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take it easy. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye.
Did we
Wow.
stop recording?
Oh yeah, hold on. I keep forgetting.